All right, everybody, and welcome to Crushing Land, the podcast that's dedicated to unlocking the secrets of successful land investing. I'm your host, Jonathan, from the Land Method, and each week we tackle different relevant topics, bringing you insights, strategies, and expert advice to help you thrive in the land investing world. Now, unlike some shows where the host claims to implement every new idea immediately to bring out dramatic effect, this is more than just taking action for action's sake. We offer special guests like we're having today that join us for longer live sessions, providing unique perspectives and expert knowledge. And our goal is not for you to emulate everything that you hear today, but for you to be able to hear these success stories and these golden nuggets and all these things, and then decide what you want to implement. Your job is to sift through what you hear and decide what resonates with you and makes sense for your unique investing journey. So if you're catching this on replay, you want to watch us, you want to join us live next time that we have a guest, keep an eye on our Facebook group, look at your inbox. We send out notifications weeks in advance, so you'll have plenty of time to tune in and participate in real time. So today, we're joined by Justin Sliva. Justin, since 2016, has been a powerhouse in real estate investing. He's been involved in transactions in over 43 states, specializing in raw land. As he brought out in his bio, he's flipped properties bought for as little as $50 to projects worth millions. Honed his expertise in this, reducing risk, streamlining processes, boosting profitability. So what are we going to focus on today? Well, we're going to talk about Justin's approach to tackling simple yet effective steps like adding a driveway, basic cleanup, and uncomplicated subdivisions. And as Justin told me, I hate seeing a sign on a property that you can't drive onto. You have to park on the street and then go through a wall of bushes or trees to get there. So learn how the practical improvements have led to massive profits and more. And as a reminder, for those of you who are here live, this is interactive. We will answer your questions at the end, so post them in the chat, or turn on your cameras at the end and ask them yourselves. So that being said, let's get ready to crush it in land investing. So Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. I followed you for a while, and like you said, we've kind of came from similar paths and backgrounds and definitely have similar objectives and goals when it comes to land investing and our viewpoint of it all. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny that we paralleled kind of along the thing and really just kind of saw each other from the outside. So I respect what you do, and because I see the no nonsense, non fluff. You don't run around saying, "Hey, the 7 figures this month" or this. You're not selling the guru hype. It's like, "Hey, this is a real thing. You can make money doing this. Sending your letters is a cheaper way. You'll implement what's best for the business and continue to make that growth for your personal business, and you're passing on those nuggets as you go through." And I want to highlight the point that you said. Nothing bothers me more. I called it the ick. When I see this beautiful property that's got a wall of bushes and a ditch in front of it, and there's no driveway, and you have to walk through it, I think about my wife trying to go look at that piece of property because she's already said no before we got out of the car. So I think it's one of those things that just kind of sticks to you and what if you put yourself in that person that's buying for you shoes. So I think that's the conversation in the frame of a site that we're going to work from today.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit because honestly, I'm going to be dead honest here with this. This is interesting to me because I have not taken things as far as you.
Okay.
And so, and I'm not opposed to that. It's just something that I think you've heard me say that. I've done improvements on paper, entitlements, things like that. And obviously, I mean, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I'm not going to go here and be like, I need to do this right, because there's only so much you can handle. And obviously, you can't implement 10 million strategies. It doesn't work. But if something fits, if it resonates. But the other thing that I always talk about, and we'll talk about this as we're going along, and the reason it is interesting to me is it is something that you can take on a property by property basis. And I've got a property right now that I'm aware of where this could be a huge, I bought it for next to nothing for what it's worth, and it's been sitting out there for a while. And it's like, I can see where taking these steps could add, not 6 figures, but could add multiple 5 figures to the deal and make it worth it and obviously sell quicker. So even in that, it interests me in that the fact of, maybe I'm not going to do it as extensively and maybe others aren't going to do it as extensively as you do, which is fine. But it is something that could, hey, they listen today and then it resonates and it's like, man, I've got this single property or I've got these couple properties and can I do what he just said? Because that could add massive, profit margins and quicker sales, right? To it because of that. So But we'll jump to that. So first off, let's just get into a little background quick.
Okay.
Because in your bio that we had on our site, which you gave me, you mentioned your background as a rail industry executive, and people asked what that was. So you don't have to
Okay.
give us like this huge detail, but
Yeah.
can you give us a little
Yeah,
note
I'll
about
kind of give
that?
that how my journey started there. 2021, my uncle, he worked for the railroad and he retired, and he was the guy that in your family, you always have that one person in your family that does better than everybody else. You know, the uncle or the aunt, the family. And his wife drove a Cadillac. They had the nice custom home. He always gave us more money at Christmas than everybody else, and he worked at the railroad. And he said, "Hey man, they're about to do a bunch of hiring." And he's telling my little brother, because my little brother didn't really have much direction. At the time, I worked for Wells Fargo. I was being recruited by Edward Jones. And I heard him tell my little brother that, and I was like, man, they've always had nice houses, nice cars, and they've always given us a lot of Christmas money. So I'm going to figure out what this is. So I go on websites, up.com, applied there, got a job as a conductor, and this was 2004. Became an engineer in 2007. In 2007, I was also in the union. I was a national delegate. I was one of the youngest national delegates I've ever had for the UTU. And then moved into management when I went to a national convention, and I saw how the union was only there if the company was surviving. So I thought the long term I needed to be on the officer side of the company. So I went into a fast track program with UP as a manager, and they basically took somebody that had 3 to 5 years of ground experience that were had union knowledge and moved us over in that because they hired too many kids straight out of college. So they didn't have practical knowledge, and our job was to go in and kind of train them and move up as you did. So I was in the first group of what they called FMTs, and we were fast tracked through. We went to Omaha, got a master's degree, like crash course in railroading over a 4 month time. You basically lived in a pod, and then you got shipped out across the network from there. And so I went to down south. I was in Angleton, Freeport, was there for 2 years, had to help. Basically, my thing there was we redid how we brought cars in and out to some customers, and we put in AI readers, which read the cars and tell you where it's at. So saved them some money. They, hey, great job. We're going to promote you. So I went to another location in Denison, Texas, was there 2 years. They had really good safety, really good flow through. They had a high recruit rate, meaning you spend a lot of crews. So got moved to Fort Worth, then moved to Shreveport, then back to Fort Worth. And they said, man, after 11 months back and forth as a director, they said, you're doing great. You're going to California next month. You know, get ready. You're going to go to Oakland. We need to get you some West Coast experience with intermodal, and then we're going to bring you back, and you're going to end up taking over operate like a service unit or something similar here back in Texas. And I said, okay. So I get home, I walk in, I say, babe, you know, after 11 months, we're getting promoted again. We're moving to Oakland. And she says, you're not moving to Oakland. I am not going. The kids are staying. My family's here. I want my kids to grow up around family. And I was like, babe, you told me we were chasing my career because you stopped teaching, and that's what it was. She goes, yeah, I've changed my mind. And so that day I called a small railroad that was here in Fort Worth and said, hey, there's some life changes going on. Here's my number, because they had an executive leaving. If y'all need somebody, just let me know. So they moved me as a chief transportation officer over there. They met my number. 9 months later, I moved into their chief operating officer's job. But since I hadn't been there long enough, they made it a general manager's job. So I lost a seat on the board, but otherwise I still was in that chief operating officer's job. So when you talk about being an executive, you're in that role. I was over anything that a train moved in your safety, service, budget, transportation plan, your maintenance on a track, maintenance on the locomotives, all the projections, all the plans, everything that had to do with getting the product from point A to point B. That was under me. I had managers, chiefs under me. The most people ever at one time, I had about 2,500 that worked for me, and so it was a little different pace. And so now I see these younger guys that come into the land business, and they're going to build this big, massive team, and they want 20 and 30 people working for them. I cringe at the fact that we're able to do what we do with one person and some subcontractors like our agents and things like that, and our people that do some cleanup work for us. So it's that was kind of that's the high level in a nutshell. So I spent 13 years in rail. One Friday morning, my CEO, and my vice president for HR called and said, "Hey, we need you to come to the office." And then I was let go, given a separation agreement, and we had the land business going on the side about 6, 8 months at that time. Hadn't sent out a big marketing push. I'm sorry, we'd sent out one big marketing push, and bought 21 properties in Terralingua, Texas. And from there, when they let me go, I said, I'm just going to give it hell and go for it and spend 6 months doing this. And I had enough runway for a year's salary in the bank that was extra. And then I brought it down to 6 months and put everything to work and just ran for it from there. And that was
Nice.
beginning of 2017. And here we are, 2025, and we're still knocking at the door and going for it.
Do you think you would have made the transition had you not been let go? I mean, were you looking for
I
being for
I
yourself because you said you were already dabbling
Yeah.
in land a little bit at that
So
point, or was that kind of, I mean, that was obviously the catalyst, but were you already kind of like in your mind, like, I don't want to be working for the man anymore type of thing,
no,
or?
man. So land for me at that time was Lamborghini money. Like I wanted to be the guy that had to work, and everybody's like, "Why the hell does this guy work for us here?" And he's driving a Lamborghini because I love cars. I'm a car guy. So if you follow my pages for any time, you'll see me rotating in and out of different cars. And so in my mind, I was when and the land thing came around because my co-host on Casual Fridays, he saw a course in a sell in 2016 and bought it. We had an Amazon company together. He calls and says, "Hey man, I need to liquidate the Amazon company. I'm going to get back into real estate." And I said, okay, cool. We're doing real estate together. He said, no, man, I'm gonna do it by myself. If you want to do it on your own. And I remember this just vividly. I'm at my office and kind of bored because everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, and I don't really have much to do. And he starts sending me these deals that he's buying 5 acres for $500. And I'm like, if I can buy 5 acres for $500, I do that all day. Like that's a no brainer. And that's where it started with the cheaper stuff. And then the stuff that I coined kind of a phrase called the bass boat property that turned into after I went on my own. But during that time, it was we were like buying for 100, bucks an acre, 125 bucks an acre, sell it for 300, do some owner finance, do whatever you can. So the typical desert squares or small properties, just trying to get our feet wet because in a business mind, if you can give somebody $100 and they give you 300 back, you're going to do that as many $100 bills as you can, and you're going to just find it. It's just the natural progression of it. But then, like we said before, the kind of this call is you do get to a point where what's enough is enough, and what does that look like for you, and do you understand what that number is for yourself? And so early on it became, how do I feed my family when I lost the job, and then going to the now what is that right balance for work home life.
Yeah, very good. It's interesting because I think everybody has like different things that push them. And obviously, I mean, you had some different things. And I talk about what you just said too all the time, especially for beginners. Because nobody's afraid of buying a property. I mean, you put a $50,000 price tag on. There's really no difference. You know that now from,
Yeah.
there's really no difference in the deals, but it's in your mind, right?
Yeah.
$50,000 as opposed to 500 or 200 or, and so I've helped different people over the years work with that strategy and be like, hey, this is what you need to do. So, now you've obviously worked in numerous states,
Yeah.
most of them, honestly, a good chunk of the country. So, what do you notice? Because this is a question I get asked all the time. And this is, again, you can go high level here. We don't have to get
Yeah.
like the super nuance, but what do you notice for differences with like regional trends or preferences based on where you are?
So I'll say, I'm going to back this up a little bit. I've done a lot of those deals because we have the funding group with Plum Investment Group, and where we partnered with deals and ran them through different portions. And so about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, we started focusing a core 200-mile radius. And at that time, and this kind of leads into the value add piece. Some of that we'll discuss in a little bit. But I took where I put a tractor and an operator full time and took 200-mile radius around their place. And so we really heavily focused there now. Early on, it became obvious to us. You wanted to be somewhat close to a major metro area. We wanted to be, that 90 minutes to 2 hours from there. And then you would look at the state and say, okay, hey, national parks, is there things that drive people to that area? And you can find that across any state. And so you kind of want to look for that. But the idea of looking for a hunting property, a fishing property, or a recreational type property in some of those different markets, it depends on where you're at and what it looks like. So I'll get a deal in Ohio, and I've done one or two there, but it's not my market and I don't really know it super well. So I kind of just go back to the basics. Okay, what do all the comps show? And am I buying it for less, and can I mark it up and still make money? And then what are my alternate exits? You got to make sure you have good access. You don't have wetlands. You're not a flood zone. Just stick to the core principles up front, and then you can exit on the backside. We're just buying an asset for less than it's worth and selling for more. So I'm not going to get too much into the trends of what, in New Hampshire, this is the type of land it sells. But if I can look at that comp and say, okay, hey, this 20-acre property is going to sell for 40 grand, and I can buy it for 18 or 19, then I know I've got some room for error in there and I can make some money on it.
Yeah, very good. And I would agree with that 100%. I think people try to look at it too deep sometimes, and I'll be like, you can look at it just from the perspective of what's common in the area. You mentioned New Hampshire. I mean, you're in New England, you're in the mountains, you're not buying maybe northern part, but overall you're not buying 50 acres to go out and ride, your dune buggies on, because there's no sand, right? Maybe snowmobiles, right? But I mean, it's just common sense in a lot of cases with that. So,
Yeah, and
all right. Well, we talked about the value add, so I mean that's why most people are here. So let's jump into that a little bit. So you've mentioned simple improvements. We'll talk about them a little bit, like adding driveways, clearing property. So what are some of the factors before you even get there? So what are some of the factors that you would consider before you even look at investing in that upgrade?
Okay. So I think the big thing for me is when I look at a property and we see is can I actually get on the property? Because I want to look at it from the eyes of the actual buyer, the end user, what they're looking at. And it's hard for a lot of us to do that. And you can see that when I look at somebody's ad that they list. Say they put it on Lands of America or they list it on Facebook. They've got the APN, they've got the lat launch, they've got all the corners, and they've got all the restrictions. They have everything that as an educator somebody teaches them, but they're not selling the property. They're just listing the facts as an investor. So when you think about what that mindset is for the person that's going to buy the property and what that actually looks like for them, well, and I talked about my wife earlier. I used to only, and I would say this is I can only buy a property that my wife can get to in her two-wheel drive Lexus by herself with no worries. And the reason I would say that is because if my wife's not going to drive her Lexus on some mountain road in the middle of nowhere, so yes, there is money to be made in those properties, but if I'm going to be extremely conservative and sell stuff that I know I can make money on every time, then I have to dial it down to what the least common denominator or the least deterrent for somebody to buy. And that least deterrent is not the husband who's dreaming, it's the wife that says, hey, we can't even get on this property, or I can't go meet you out there at our property. So I have to clean up to that point and what that looks like. So when I talked about earlier, the ick for me is if I see this property and it's parked on the side of the road and the guy has to park and they're like, hey, it's got great access. And I'm like, so somebody brought me a deal. I say, yeah, it has great access. It's got blacktop. How do I get on the property? And they're like, well, it's just right there. It's right next to the road. Well, then you actually look at it. If you ever looked on the side of a road, typically there's a bar ditch, and then it's sometimes of the months or sometimes of the year it's covered in water. Well, how does that person get across that if it's wet? And then how do you get over there? So do you have a driveway permit? Do you have those things? So for me, if it's got legal access, great. But how do I get on the property? Can I fix that? And what does that cost? And get the permit, you get the culvert, you put the rock down, you have the guy come out there and spread it all so it all goes right. And then now once you're on there, are you still parked on the side of the road, or can you actually get into the property and what that looks like? And so, we started in about 2020 saying, okay, hey, we're going to spend $1,000, $1,500 on our property. And this is during the heyday, right towards the end of the heyday of when everything was going COVID crazy. And we started just doing a little bit of cleanup, saying, okay, hey, I'm going to spend $1,500 on a property. If I'm going to make $25,000 and I spend $1,500 just to clean it up a little bit more, what's that return for me? And we were seeing it turn our cycle times down 30 to 45 days. So that $1,000 to $1,500 in cleanup bought me 45 days on a turn. Well, if I do that multiple times in a year, what does that buy me on my return on my investment the course of the year? So it became of how do I compound these together while making the product a better product for that end buyer? Because I will tell you, if I ask my wife to crawl through a thicket of bushes, she's going to laugh at me and she won't even see the property for what it is. But if I can get that man to get on the car, put two cars on it with the realtor, they can open the door, walk around the car, and the wife doesn't get scratched. And then, by the way, I have him run trails out the path of least resistance, and she can walk through the property and sees a couple big trees or a picnic table or a chair or a fire ring. And he says, babe, we could cook marshmallows right there. She's now romanticizing this place. And what did it really cost me? It cost me a day's worth of work for a guy in a skid steer and then and a little bit of extras. I'll tell him, hey, if you see some rocks, make a circle there to put fire in it. He'll put some firewood in it or whatever. And so we doubled down on this in 22, where I hired an operator, and he does this on every property we buy inside that 200-mile radius. Like that's his job. He knows we close on Monday. He's there on Tuesday, and he does that. He knows and we bought a tractor for him to do this with. So we spent $70,000. He runs it, and he rents the tractor back from us. And now I don't suggest that for everybody, but what I'm saying is that $1,500 for the wife to be on board for you. Now you've got an ally. The realtor likes it because it's a little bit better of a property, and then the pictures look better, and they can actually visualize what they're going to do and think about that next step. And it costs you $1,500.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one thing I like that you said there was because you mentioned those other type of properties, and you said that there's obviously money to be made there. It's just not what you focus on. And I think that's a huge point. Is we're not trying to steer anybody away from those type of properties because I do properties like that. But it does help me, people that are listening, maybe newer people that are kind of like got their hands in 15,000 different things to see, hey, here's somebody that's successful that's basically saying, I kind of back away from those because it doesn't fit my business, doesn't fit my vision, which is what goes back to what I said at the beginning is, it's not to emulate you. It's to say, hey, does this resonate with me? And do I want to add this? Is this something I want to look at? But that's a perfect example there because there is, you can only do so much. And so
Yeah.
that helps, like, hey, I'm working in this radius, I'm doing this, and it's creating better turnover. I'm getting value. And honestly, I mean, even if it doesn't give you value add, it's giving you quicker sales. You got $25,000 on a piece of property that has that, and somebody else has the same exact property listed, same price next door nearby, and yours has it and theirs doesn't. Yours is going to be the one that sells
Yep.
for that property. So you may lose the $1,500 as far as, like, you may not get it back and being able to sell it now for $26,500, but you also are going to have half the time on the market, a quarter of the time on the market, or something. So opportunity cost,
Yep.
is in there as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I'll say there's two. I want to make 2 points real quick, and these are tried and true for me. If you've never we bought in 2017, 2018, we bought a bunch of properties in Southeast Oklahoma in the Ouachita Mountains. So at that time, when I was brand new, I wanted to make sure I could get to every property, and I got stuck on the side of a mountain in a two-wheel drive Jeep. It was a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I just bought it. It was a cash car because I lost my company truck, and I got stuck on the side of a mountain. It took me an hour and a half to get the rocks lined up on this ditch so I could drive across it to get back because my car slid off the road. And so when I say that now, just think if that was a husband and wife that had no wherewithal about it and they fell off the side of the mountain right then, or they got stuck and they had to call a tow truck. Do you think I would have made that sell? I wouldn't have been able to make a sell there. So, you learn real quick about yourself. It's like, okay, well, what makes me uncomfortable out and doing this? I'm from the city. I've spent time on ranches. My grandparents had one growing up. I spent enough time on land. I know myself. I know my way around it and outdoors and riding four-wheelers and things like that. But most people that are in a city, this is a dream for them. It's a just this fantasy of, I get to go away from the concrete jungle to my little campsite property, and I get to enjoy this. And they're going to use it 4 to 10 times maybe, but you got to make sure that they feel safe doing it and kind of create that. The second piece is, if you've ever walked out on a property you've purchased, and I don't know how many listeners have actually gone out to a piece of deal they're going to flip versus just being a virtual flipper. When you go out there, you start noticing you pick up stuff. Like, you'll pick up branches that are in your way, and you'll start moving stuff around. You start to naturally straighten things up. It's just in our nature. It's ours. We own it. We want it straightened up. So when I bring that chipper, that mulcher out there, and he comes out there and starts cutting it up real cleanly, it naturally puts somebody at ease. Their anxiety is down. So, and I would guarantee, if you walked out there with a client, they start to walk the property, they start moving stuff around, even though they're looking at the property to buy it, because they're starting to envision what they would do with it. So if I can get them to that next step of comfort, I've got to sell a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And there's a lot of different ways that's done. I mean, I've noticed that even at a much smaller level, but it's so funny that I had a piece of property that was not being sold, and it was literally just like 4 foot deep grass.
Yeah.
And they didn't care. And I just sent somebody out to clear it.
Yeah.
And that only cost me a couple $100.
Yeah.
And that thing went under contract in like a week. It was
Yeah.
like all of a sudden just a clear lot, as opposed to like something that you could only stare at. I mean, it was on a road. It was it wasn't like none of the other stuff you mentioned. So no drive was needed. I mean,
Yeah.
just clear right in. But like, there is a difference between standing on the road and just staring at, something that's up here, and you can't,
Yeah.
as opposed to seeing all the way back and all the way through and all of that. So there is something to be said, obviously, about just the vision part, because at that, we're looking at it from, I guess, the perspective of just flipping it, right? We don't have any emotional attachment, whereas a lot of our end buyers do end up having some sort of emotional attachment, and they're developing that right from the beginning, with things. So that makes 100%, it's so clear as day as to why that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the important part is to remember, when you get on a dating app. I'm not on one. I've been married for a long time, but my friends that get on them, they go have professional model pictures taken. They have a professional photographer get on. These are guys, because their response rate is better if they look right. They're not disheveled. They not look like the pictures are just kind of taken at a bar somewhere. They look like they're more professional. Well, you think about that on a piece of property. If you clean it up just a little, they have points of view they can take pictures from, and it makes it look like it's worth even more than what you have it listed for. Now your $25,000, $50,000 property looks like it's worth more, and now they're getting the bargain, and you've shifted the power in a dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the other things you mentioned was uncomplicated subdivisions. You'll do uncomplicated subdivisions. So those two words may seem like, complete opposites to people listening here. So just talk about that for a minute. Identifying land parcels in your mind, or what does that mean to you? What is you'll get in and do an uncomplicated subdivision. So what does that mean? What are you looking for? What are you doing?
Man, that's a great question, and I like that because it's one of those things in the business that we turned on, and it's probably 2021, where we saw an ease of use. So simple subdivides, or every state, counties have their own little things there. But let's just say I'll use Oklahoma, for instance. They allow you to cut to 4 without having to get platted. You don't have to have a certain road frontage. You don't have to get all the signatures from the DEQ. You can come in and just cut a property into 4s without without platting. So what that means is if I bought a 40 acre and I could cut it into 4 10s pretty easily, then now I've naturally forced appreciation. And I've taken a property that may be out of somebody's price range into a property that's not. So you could say, if I could, the good part about this is I can offer more on the front end. I can pay 60, 70 cents on a dollar for the 40 acres because I'm going to force the appreciation. I know the market value is going to go up. So for instance, you may pay 2,000 2,500 bucks an acre on a 40 acre. So spend 100 grand. Well, if I put it into 4 10s, those 10s are going to sell for $5,000 an acre. I can put them on owner financing, do whatever I want, but just call it $5,000 an acre there. Well, 5 times 40 is 200. I doubled my money, and I had a deal that probably would have passed up if I was basing it off the 40 acre price, because the 40 acre price on the market would have been about 120 grand. So I've just by getting a survey, which cost me $2,000 to $5,000, I was able to do that. Now, for me, I like to clean it up a little bit and put the driveways in so I know that somebody has access to it. But what with that forced appreciation, with that simple idea is I can go on market and have zero marketing spend and look at, say, a 30 acre property that's dirty, it hasn't been cleaned up, it's just overgrown, and they're trying to sell it. I can offer them just under market value for that 30, split it up into 3 10s, do a little bit of cleanup work, and now force the appreciation by pretty quickly. And what did I really have in it? Survey and a guy out there for 2 days. And then depending on the driveway needs, like what that looks like, call it $2,000 a driveway, so that's 6 grand. Survey cost another 5, so I'm 11 grand, and then 2 days worth of cleanup. So I'm 15 grand into it, and now I've forced depreciation by double. And so you can really make that worthwhile for you.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I like subdividing. I'm not big into development at all, so I don't want to put roads in. I don't want to do those subdivisions, and obviously that adds an insane amount of expense. But I give an example of probably one of the cleanest, easiest ones, and it goes along perfectly with what you're saying. And ours was more along the lines of just a long half mile of road frontage. Actually, more than half mile of road frontage, but it was only 400 feet deep, long, thin strip. So, that was an opportunity where they still gave us a discount on the product because we still went in our normal way, because why not? And they took the offer. But had they not, we easily could have been able to pay market, which at that time, that property, this was a few years ago, that property was about 150 as it sat. But we've got 14 lots out of it, right down that, and we sold them for 30 grand each. So even at 150, at 30 grand each, you're talking, we're already in $400,000. So easily could have made, and we only put, same as you, a little more. We had 20 grand into it. I mean, that was because, again, 14 lots, engineering company, they had to get that one. They did have to go through a few, replatting and stuff. No sewer lines there, so we perked every one of them, obviously, so that they were buildable lots, because we wanted soil testing, and that's just an example where, I mean, you just took a property that was just sitting there that's like long, and it's like it just fits. It's like nothing extra than hiring a few simple people, surveyors, engineer, things like that, as opposed to bringing in roads and paving and all of that. That's a whole different world. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not a world that, like I've said, you've said, there's only so many things you can do, right? And so that's taking it to another level and all that. So that resonates big with me. I thought it was funny because I love the way you said uncomplicated subdivisions, because I think I talk about very similarly the same way. And there's 2 examples there, one from me, one from you, for people that are listening, of what's actually out there.
Yeah. I think it's important, though, because we saw over the last couple of years, the echo chamber of Land Guru has been subdivide. And I think we saw a lot of people shift their entire businesses that way. versus just sticking to what they knew was working, what they were making their money on. And when the opportunity came up because the property was long and skinny and you could make it 14 lots, you did it then. You didn't change your core values. You didn't change what been making you money, what you've been successful with. You just added the tool to the tool belt. And so that makes a big difference in a lot of guys' businesses where it's no more additional marketing spend. It just gives you another exit and then allows you a little bit more runway on the front side to make sure you can actually close that deal. And so, I
Yeah.
don't know how many deals I've gotten beat out with by early on where I was like, I can only do 2,000 bucks an acre. Well, I probably could have done 2,500 bucks an acre and split it up or done something different to force a little bit of appreciation and still been able to make money, the right amount of money on the deal.
Yeah, we've done them numerous times over the years with simple things like that. And I agree. I definitely see a lot more push towards subdividing now, and people are trying to. The problem is like a lot of the deals don't come together. The land, yeah, maybe it's subdividable, but not simple. It's much more, and that's not something that there's people out there that I watch that I know are legit. People that I know personally that have been doing this, and they're showing pictures, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got backgrounds, they've got deep pockets, they've got, they've done multifamily, so now they're spreading into multiple single family with, they've done land, people that know what they're doing, as opposed to buy a course and go find this X acres thing and you're going to do all it doesn't, it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, I agree 100%. So that actually leads me to what I was going to ask you, subdividing or improving anything. I mean, what do you think are some common mistakes? Especially you probably see it more because you're actually educating people on this and helping them and bringing them on. What do you think some common mistakes are that investors make when they're like thinking about improving a land or subdivide or anything like that?
So I think the most a couple of the most common mistakes that we see are not being able to get access. When you start adding in driveways, you need to know what the required road frontage is between the two driveways, or you may end up with shared driveways. And they don't know who to contact, whether it's the county, whether it's the state highway department, and they don't realize that hey, some states require 500 feet, or may look at line of sight and change how far the driveway is going to be apart because that's going to change what you can and can't do on a property. They don't understand the platting or the subdivision requirements for that county and how that falls in with the state being aligned. So that they just think, well, it's 10 acres, so I can do this. Well, so everything's going to be over 10 acres and it's 100 lots. They're going to try to cut into 110-acre lots. And you're like, okay, well, now to do that, you need the roads, the infrastructure, but you've got to get water studies done and what that looks like. So every state has those nuances. So like we said, the driveways, the state level nuances, but really what the property is going to look like at the end of it. And I've seen so many guys come in and say, oh, we're just going to cut it and make 10-acre strips. And it looks like they're making like an airport or runway track style like lot. And they're just like, so it's a 40 and they cut it into 10 4-acre tracks that are just long and skinny. And they don't think about the usability of the track that they're cutting into. And if it even matches what the area really needs. And so it's easy. Like I've seen a bunch of guys say, oh man, I'm going to do 1/4-acre lots here and it's going to make so much money. But then the state requires, you have to have water there, you have to have sewer there, and you don't have any of that. So you can't actually, it's an illegal subdivision from the beginning. And so people just don't think through what they're actually going to end up because everybody says that you're going to force appreciation by cutting it up. So there's the nuances like that. So those are the big things I see right off the bat.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with someone because one of the things that I would add to this that I've seen people do is they think they should just because they can. And I'm like, that's not accurate. I was talking to somebody not that long ago, and they're like, oh, I've got 50 acres and I can split it up into 5 10-acre properties. And I'm like, well, are there any other 10-acre properties around? They're like, no, everything's 50 acres. I'm like, well, then why would somebody want your 10?
Yeah.
There's a reason they're all 50 still, right? Yeah. You're not the first person that discovered this little area of land ever. It's like everybody else has skipped doing it for a reason. So it's like now you've got 5 10 properties. That's great. But nobody wants 10s because everything else is 50. So it's like, when you're out in the middle of the desert and things like that, we talked about that earlier. So don't, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And, I think people get hung up on that. They see dollar signs because they just look at it the wrong way. And, it doesn't mean that everything fits. Right. So yeah, I would agree. So what are I think you've already kind of talked about this, but maybe just sum it up really quick on the specific improvement. Is it the driveway? Is that the one that you consistently see bring the highest return on investment for you?
So and I said this a minute ago, anytime that we get a car onto the property, whether it's with the driveway or we clean up what's there, or we put in a new one, I also want to make sure that I can get the realtor's car and the other person's car on it and open up a spot. So typically we try to open up a half acre to an acre and then cut the trails into it, from their path of least resistance. Because I mean, you're talking about a four-string mulcher that's just churning like this, or whether depending on which kind you get, but you're running through and not knocking over the big trees, but they can kind of go in, and it allows for somebody to actually experience the property from the inside and not from the outside looking in. And so for me, that's the biggest thing that you can do. And I've tried it and not done it, and then come back and done it, and it's tried and true that if I can get a person to get on the property and they can look around, and they're in the middle of the property and they can look around and see that they're actually feeling that removing themselves from the city or other people, it really pays dividends for you, because that's the ultimate goal for them to be out in rural America, is to get away from the concrete jungle. And so if you can give them that feeling right off the bat, then that's where you need to be. And it's work, like you said, you clear it once, and a few days later, you got it under contract because the next person went out there. So I always tell people, stick to the playbook, run it, and just really see that.
So you mentioned everything within a 200-mile radius for you. You mentioned owning the tractor. And you also said, I don't recommend that you just go out and buy a tractor now, right? I mean, obviously you've gotten to that level because you're doing this a lot. So what about the investor that's not local to the property? Hey, I've got a property that's 1,000 miles away, but you know what? I can see where this is beneficial. I can see where it makes sense. So what do you tell that person? Just hire somebody? I mean,
yeah. So I mean, you can find different groups, whether it's on Facebook or you just go look at tree service or dirt work groups and say, hey man, here's what I want to do. I want to make sure the driveway onto the property is cleaned up, and then I just want to clean out an area. Give me about a half acre cleared area, and then run some trails with a brush cutter. What do you charge me to do that? So typically a skid steer, it's going to vary a little bit, but for about $1,800 for 8 hours, you can get somebody to come in and they can do a ton with a skid steer in that kind of time frame. We'll drop in poly culverts, which are pretty cheap. A 50-foot thing of poly is probably $500, so that's multiple driveways if you need to. Tell them to get you a 20-foot. Drop in 3 loads of rock. That's about $1,500. So a driveway is going to cost you anywhere from $1,500 to about $2,000 if it's going to be caliche and gravel. And then they'll just come in there with their skid steer and they can grub it, or they can use one of the mulchers and clean it up. So I mean, for $3,000 to $4,000, you make a total impact, and the property looks totally different. So those people that've been driving by every day, they look at it and go, oh wow, something's going on over there. And you just tell them, hey, just send me a picture of what it looks like before and what it looks like after. And I'm telling you, within a day, we have a subdivide that we did in Haskell, and we have 7 tracks on it. We put in 6 new driveways, 2 loads of rock on each one, and then brush hogged everything. And it took us 4 days, and brush hogged the 76 acres that it is, and put in all those driveways with culverts and everything. And so I mean, a real quick process. And that's with one guy, probably using the wrong machine, but we were able to get it done. It could be done a lot quicker. So
yeah. So it's just reaching out, finding the right people, just like anywhere
yep.
else, and just
Yeah,
like anything else.
What I do is said, hey, I try to tell them to keep it super simple. Like, hey, here's the road frontage, what I see on like Onyx or Land ID. Find the path of least resistance. If I don't know where a driveway is already in there, find the path of least resistance and then put a driveway in. If I don't have to get a permit, or the county, I'll call them and say, hey, say it's a county road. Hey, I need to put a driveway in. Do y'all require anything? What you'll find sometimes in rural America, they want it done their way. If you'll pay them the $500 for a 10 horn, they will drop it in and put their rock on it and smooth it for you, so they know it's done properly. And so it's, that's just getting to call the county and doing that. Text dot, you'll have to, like a text dot or ODOT or whatever state dot, you'll usually have to mark on a survey where you want it, and they'll come out and mark it on the road and give you a permit for that. And there's a permitting process. They check line of sight and make sure they have the distance. And sometimes they will ask you to do concrete. Sometimes they'll just allow you to do caliche or a road base. So just kind of depends on what the requirements are.
Yeah, and a lot of that depends on what kind of road it's on. I mean, we've dealt with that. I mean, are you on a back gravel road? Are you on, a town road that's just, 2-lane tight paved road? Are you on a state highway? I mean, there's a huge variation there, and obviously that affects, the one we did, the subdivision, that they didn't require us to do it, which part of the reason we didn't do it, honestly. They didn't require it to approve it, but like the subdivision was on a state highway, so every driveway off had to be paved. Well, I wasn't going to go pave 14 driveways in, right? Yeah. So, but the buyer just was aware of that. Hey, you're going to put in a paved driveway, right? And so it was cleared off little aprons where the buyer, we had those cleared off, like little tiny aprons, just a couple feet, so that they could see where it was going to be. But then they could, and because they were deep, 400 feet deep, we didn't bother, because some people want to be, 100 feet from the road, somebody else wants to be 300 feet back, you know, so we left that alone. But that's an example there of just how everything changes based on, you know, who you're dealing with, the state regulations, county regulations, city regulations, if you're in city limits, you know, what kind of road you're on, you know, all of those different things. So
Yeah. I'll say this, that I use a term with people sometimes: how much do you put in research and development into your business, right? And by that, that's kind of a broad term. How much do you just try shit with your gambling money? So like for us, we had custom fence like aprons built for one project where they were welded together, 4 slats that we cemented in, and we hung custom gates that we bought for it, really nice, custom painted, and had nice driveways put in. And it cost us it was like $3,500 a driveway. But in my mind, I was like, I can standardize this. I can put this, have these nice panels already ready, the gates already ready, and I just go drop them in place with the culvert and the rock when we do it. The project turned out great. At the end of the day, it didn't really make a huge difference in what people saw. I could have put in 2 wooden posts and a gate, and now they have a focal point. And what I found early on, I was doing some properties in Utah. We had bought and sold there, and there was this ranch, and I think it's called Silverhorn or Silver Lake Ranch in Duchesne, and they're all like 70 to 80 acre tracts. And we ended up buying 4 in this one little neighborhood. And the ones that sold the quickest for me were the ones that had a gate. And it was just one of those aha moments. It's like everybody wants to know where the gate is, or we would put in, hey, it's at the green gate or it's at the red gate, and people would drive straight there. So now they had a focal point they were looking for. They just weren't looking at this open vastness of space. And those properties that had the gate on them sold for $10,000 to $15,000 more and sold quicker because we could get people to them. And it was like, if I could just do this on everything. Now I just say, hey, yeah, you're going to take County Road 401 to the green gate. It's on the left-hand side. It's cleared out for you. It's clean. They pull up and and you have the picture of the gate, so they know what it looks like. Now in their mind, it eases them into that transition of going to rural America.
yeah, and you're talking about you know, a couple posts and some concrete and
a Tractor Supply
$1,000 gate from Tractor Supply or something.
Oh
right?
yeah, you're not even $1,000. We were buying them scratch and dent for $150. And
okay.
it's a ranch gate, right? So does it matter if it's
that's gonna get hit within days anyway, right? So
yeah, so $150 for that, and you're talking the two fence posts. Now, sometimes the fence posts won't hold as long because they're going to start to wear, but you can use a 4x4 post or a 6x6 post, put that in, concrete it in pretty good, and it's going to be good for a year to 2. It'll start to sag a little bit, but what you're doing is just creating that emotion when they go out there. Now they got something to tinker with, they got somewhere to go to, and it's been an easy transition for us, and it's an easy thing. Our tractor guy just throws the 4 post on his trailer with the tractor, throws the gate and underneath the tractor, and he hauls ass out there, drops it in with some concrete, and has it painted and set up in the same day.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of those things too. I mean, obviously, whatever you decide to do or don't do, you don't have to make it pretty. You just have to make it functional and make it so that, because people are going to change. They may look at it and be like, oh, I don't want the wood. I want to do steel. I want to let them do it when they buy it. They can go in and fix it. They may put a custom one on that if it is their ranch that has like their logo. People go out and spend these kind of big money with welders and stuff, and don't worry about that stuff. It's just more of an identification, giving them the vision, because now it's like they're not necessarily visioning the $150 cheap gate. They're visioning their ranch behind that and what it would look like, and it's giving them a much clearer picture. So I think people overthink that process a lot too, right? Is how far you need to take it.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm not telling, like you said, I'm not telling anybody to make this, but I have been to too many properties. And early on, I went to every property because I wanted to make sure I could get to them. I wanted to know that I was buying something I wasn't going to lose on. And every guru across America tells you, you don't do that. You don't drive to the properties. Well, shit, when you're stepping up from a couple hundred, $1,000, $3,000 property up to spending your first 30 up to $150,000 on a property, you want to know where your money's going. And I'm human like everybody else. And so I'm like, okay, well, I need to make sure I can get to the property. There's no surprise. There's not a big tire dump out there or something. And so what I found is I'd go to these old gates and it's just overgrown. So I'd always bring a weed eater with me. I'd bring some branch trimmers, and I would always cut around it and clean it up a little bit so I could drive my truck in. And it's always sucked because I would always get ticks, or I would get flea bites, or I'd get, chiggers, and I get tore up. And I'm like, oh man, cool. I worked at the ranch today and I did this stuff in land. But also I was like, what if the buyer was having to do this? They're not going to be happy about this. And it didn't take much time. It doesn't take much money. And so again, that's the eye from the buyer side, not the investor and what it looks like on a spreadsheet, but really create that emotional attachment for them early on. And I don't think that's talked about enough from us or our perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, because I tell people you don't have to go look at properties all the time.
Yeah.
And you probably do too, but it really depends on what you're doing with them.
Yeah.
there's very rare that I will buy a property outright
Okay.
that is high end that I haven't had eyes put on somehow.
Yep.
Right? Maybe not mine, but somebody they've
Yeah.
gone out, they've taken pictures, they've done something for me. Now, if you're talking about a $5,000 lot and you're selling it for 15, who cares, right?
Yep.
A lot of it depends. If you're not even going to take possession of it, or if you're only taking possession of it for 30 seconds, right, double closing it, again, who cares?
Yep.
But if it's something that you're going to invest time and effort in, you're going to buy with your own cash, you're going to be sitting on it, you're talking about 5 figures, maybe 6-figure properties at this point, you're dropping 50, 60, $100,000 into, that does change the perspective. And I think I agree with you 100%. It's not talked about enough because I think too many people treat everything the same,
Yeah.
right? That the way you do everything is the same. And it can be, you can go buy a $100,000 piece of property without ever looking at it if your only goal is to flip it really quick and double close. But if you're looking at value add, which is what you're talking about, the subdivision I did there, going back to that because we've already talked about it. I didn't put eyes on it, but I had eyes on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't anywhere near me, but I had an engineer going out. I had surveyors going out. I had people taking pictures, videos. I mean, we wanted to see what we were getting into, obviously, before just dumping money into it. So I agree. That's a huge point. And maybe that actually kind of goes well with what I was going to ask you, because you mentioned, shifting gears a little bit here, we talked about at the beginning your railroad background, and you mentioned that. But one of the things you mentioned to me when you sent me your information was how that helped you hone your skills and reduce your risk,
Yeah.
streamlining your processes and all of that. So that may fit in with what you're talking about here a little bit. I mean, could you give us kind of like the 30,000-foot view of what that means, or what
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people miss is the human element to this. We're all natural. We're creatures of habit. We all have natural habit, whether it's business or whether it's just the way we interact outside. And so at the railroad, they're no different. And you would have a conductor. He's always going to switch cars the same. He's always going to make the same steps. He's going to walk to the switch. He's going to get on and off the car the same way. So I can't change the job every time for him, but I can put in standard parameters around that and standardize it. In the military, they call it SOPs, or standard operating practices. And so when you look at it, and we've done real good about teaching people how to do that during their due diligence, you check these things. And typically, if somebody misses something, that check mark in their due diligence, it's a bad thing because we'll find it in a little bit, right? So if I sent you a property or you send me a property, I need the APN, the county, the state, and the owner's name. From there, I can look at that property. I'm going to tell you whether it has access or not that I can see, whether it's wetland, flood zone, whether, whatever that is. So you start to get that way with it all the way through the buy side and the sell side and what that looks like. So again, we talk about running that playbook. But when you step out on a property, you go out and you think about it in that mindset. Okay, I'm going to come out here. Can I get on the property? Am I getting all tore up? And you start asking yourself those questions, and you start seeing the same thing. It becomes a pattern to you when you follow that same checklist inside and out. And when something varies from that, that's where your risk is reduced, because now if I look at a property and it doesn't have a road next to it, I go, what's the legal access? How do we got it? Do we have an easement? So now we have a question. It's a trigger point. And it's real easy on a due diligence part, but if you do that on the backside and you have those thought processes, those trigger points where you say, okay, hey, this property, it's got really big trees, or it's got a bunch of small pines. Can I actually even walk onto the property? I went through a group of properties in Oklahoma where I went up to it, and it had a bunch of 3-inch pine because it had been clear cut 15 years ago. And they were so thick you couldn't actually walk onto the property. And then we were like, it's got good views, so we're going to have to cut through each lot to get to the view side so people can actually walk onto the property and see this beautiful view on the other side. And then when we ran the numbers, the deal on paper looked great, but when we actually went out there, it didn't work for us. And so there was that variance in what happened, and it's because we followed that process of what it needed to happen and what it looked like. So I would tell you, you make your habits, and then there's the old adage, plan, do, check, and adjust, and that goes all the way through. So if something keeps popping up, like I'm buying something with questionable access, the road's not maintained, you have to start making your buying parameters or your what you're looking at a little bit tighter, and that way you reduce your risk as well.
I think you talked about something there that resonates very much with me, because I think this gets skipped way too much, and that's due diligence.
Yep.
And I think due diligence gets skipped a lot as far as how far you go with it, because people often are just looking at the quick flip and they're just getting the information that they need, which obviously, due diligence goes further based on the further that you take it, based on the value of the property. Obviously, I mean, if you're just flipping little subdivision lots, like you talked about the squares and stuff, there's not a whole lot to those, right? But if you're dealing with bigger stuff, so what is your take on the approach that investors should take with due diligence? Because I think, like I said, that's to me is one of the things that I put a lot of focus on it, and I talk about it in our teaching. And I feel like so many just kind of like skip that. It's like get it under contract, get it listed out there, stick it out there, and sell it and be done with it.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is you used to hear niche riches are in the niches. We've all heard that term. And so when you niche down into stuff, you start to see the things that pop up in each one. So if I said, hey, when I mail if I asked you about your mailing, you would say I probably mail quarter acre up to whatever acreage. And if I said, hey, you asked me, I say, hey, I mail 10 acres and above. Well, Justin, why do you mail 10 acres and above? Because the due diligence required on a quarter acre lot is different than a 10 acre lot. And so when you start to get smaller, you require more due diligence. So if you said, hey, Justin, I want you to fund one of my deals, I would say, hey, man, I appreciate it. What size is it? Because I only fund 5 and above. And they go, well, why don't you fund this quarter acre infill lot? It's great. Well, then I don't know if it's buildable. Can it get septic on it? Is it going to perk? Texas, a quarter acre lot without water you can't build on it. So it's non-usable to me. And so if you don't know those nuances and you didn't ever understand that in the due diligence, you're going to miss it and you're going to end up with lots that you can't actually sell. They're going to be unbuildable and unusable. And it's not because you didn't know, it's because you jumped in so quick just trying to get a deal that you didn't understand the due diligence piece that had to go with it. So for me, when I fund a deal, if it's a newer person and they need funding on a 5 acre property, the chances are they don't know the steps it's going to take to know if a quarter acre lot's buildable or not, or a half acre lot's going to be buildable or not, or 1 acre, what's the difference is. And like you can say in Texas, the law's changed where if it doesn't have rural water and it needs septic, it's got to be 2 acres. And so now you got a guy trying to buy, man, this is 1 acre lot. We're looking at that today. The guy tells me it has old septic and it has a well on it. So I could buy that 1 acre lot and turn it into a mobile home lot. But now I got to verify it because I don't see a structure ever there. So I don't know why somebody puts septic on a lot that's never had a structure. And I've gone back 30 years through Google Earth and a well. So now I've got to send somebody out there to see if it's actually there. But that one piece, not knowing that in the due diligence piece, is going to make a difference whether that lot's worthless. Worthless is relevant, but is it a $25,000 or $30,000 lot for a mobile home, or is it a $7,000 buy for an $8,000 sell to the neighbor? And so it's just those little things like that and asking those questions. And so you can harness what you look at, the riches and the niches, know your main business really good, but slide down to that other stuff when you actually understand it and you have some time under your belt.
Yeah, and a lot of it, like you said, depends on what's already there. I get that all the time because I think people treat infill lots you mentioned. Now don't get me wrong, I do a ton with infill lots. But you got to realize the differences. They're not all equal. And people are be like, oh, well, there's a quarter acre lot here and a quarter acre lot there. And so this one, obviously mine's worth that. Well, do you have public water?
Yeah.
Do you have sewer? Because if you're missing either of those, sewer in particular, quarter acre, get a septic tank in, it's a little tough, right? If there's public water, you may get it, but with the wells, usually not as big of an issue for a quarter acre, right? If it's got public sewer and you can, but then you get both utilities and it's like, well, that's a totally different game. Okay, both utilities are there. It's the county says it's buildable. It's a lot of record. Huge difference as opposed to like just missing one little nuance item, right?
Yep.
And so yeah, it's something that's just skipped over so much, and it's literally like in our education, it's like these are the questions you need to ask the county, and if the answer is no, then the next question needs to be this, and if the answer is yes, then the next question. It's not just like needs well, needs. We've all seen those ads, right? It's like half acre, needs well, needs septic, no details, call the county, do that. It's like, well, how quickly are you going to sell that property when you're just like telling them to do all your research for you?
Yep. Again, looking at it from the eyes of the buyer, not the investor.
Yeah. So you talked before, really quick, everybody we got a lot more jump on here. So guys, this is interactive, just as a reminder. So feel free to post questions in the chat. We'll get to them at the end or as we're going along here. And like I said, if you want to ask them yourself, you're welcome to. You can turn your cameras and your audio at the end of this. But for those of you who didn't hear that early on, and you're having questions about what you're doing there, what we're discussing here, feel free to post them in the chat. So, one of the things you talked about was working with people and things like that. So obviously you've got some mentorship, you've got some education. So. What inspired that? I mean, what inspires you to start creating, joint ventures and working with people doing this?
So when we started in 2016, everybody at the time, capital was a constraint for most people because we were a side hustle. You're working full time, and I could never find somebody that was willing just to help me on a deal based on the deal's merit. And so in 2017, into 17, 2018, I had a couple big deals come in, and I'm asking people for money, it just never really worked out. And then I had a business partner. We had a supplement company together. We had gotten sued and we won the lawsuit, but we ended up dissolving the company and selling out some pieces of it. And we bought an apartment complex. And then we flipped it. And he was like, well, what are you going to do with your money? And I was like, man, I really just want to put it back to work in the land space because I think there's a lot of people that have land deals that just don't know where to get money from. So it allows us to scale without sending more mail. Like I have all these deals and we'll just take a portion of it because at that time there was one guy that would do funding and he split time between China and Austin. And his basically you had to know him and he would do like a $250,000 line of credit and he was taking half of your money or half your deals. And then he needed to approve everything going through. And I was like, okay, well, man, that's kind of interesting. And so I'd talked to him for a minute, but a guy came up and was like, hey, man, I've got this deal. I just don't understand it. And it needed a legal description. I was like, well, we can get a surveyor to go out there. I said, or I can just write the legal description for you that talks about the 15 acres. And he's like, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and fund the deal and do that? So at that time, we noticed there was a niche for a little bit of coaching, but also putting your money where your mouth is, right? And I think that's where anybody wants to know is if somebody's going to do a deal with you, they have a vested interest. They're going to actually stand behind what they say. And that was a big question for me early on with a lot of the gurus were, well, if you're making all this money and these guys have all these deals and you're playing, would you do this deal? And you're telling them yes, but you wouldn't put your money into the deal, you're missing out on a ton of opportunity. And that's the way my head was working. And so when we sold that apartment complex, we flipped it in like 3 months. We both made 100 grand, both of us put our money into that. And that's what started Plum Investment Group in 2018. So at that time, we were the first company that would fund a deal for you that just didn't matter who you were, who you went through, any education, didn't matter. Just brought the deal to us, we'd look at it and we'd fund it. And since then, there's probably 1,000 funders now. I think every real estate investor now will fund a deal for you because they just it became easier for them, and so they followed kind of that template going on. So that was 2018, and we've done deals all over with that. Right now, we've moved into a fund as well. We have the SEC fund that we do a note fund or note offering, and then we have some subdivides that we have in there as well. So it's called Pasture Holdings, and so that's been the last passion project for the last year and a half, building that up. We built our note portfolio over at about $1.1 million. It's never missed a payment to the investors. They make 11%. And so for accredited investors. And then our subdivides, we've done 5 projects. 2 have gone full cycle. We have 3 projects that are live right now. 2 are getting some interest. We have 1 that's selling a property next week, but buy for 5, like that one's buy for 5,000. We got them on the market for just over 9. We offer owner financing. We can sell them to our fund or sell them to other investors. So just different ways to vertical and move all our stuff around. So it's kind of been a full thing from buying $50 lots off of for the coastal properties off of Arkansas to now doing these bigger deals and working with other people's money and having the SEC kind of keeping an eye on us to make sure we're doing what's right and what we say we're going to do.
Yeah, interesting. So that's crowdfunding. For those of who aren't familiar with that,
it's not crowdfunding; it's syndication.
Syndication. Yeah. So it's basically, I mean, for those of you who aren't aware, because I don't think this isn't talked about a huge amount in land. It's talked about as a big multifamily push. Obviously, people that are out there, office space used to be. I mean, obviously that's kind of dead world now. But these buildings that basically under the REIT, the real estate investment trust, and then they're buying like the insane skyscrapers, the insane, the buildings that you see in cities and things like that. But then under that, when you start getting into different classes, that's where you get a lot of the syndication. And there's tons of people out there that talk about it in multifamily and things like that. That's probably the biggest area right now. But a lot of people overlook the fact that it can be done in any real estate. It doesn't have to be a structure on it. And then they're like, well, how do we get our money back? Because it's like, well, you're leasing the land out. There's different things. So it is something, for those of you that are interested, obviously you could reach out to Justin. We'll put his information in the description later and everything like that. And if that's something that you want to have like passive income involved, where it doesn't have to be in a building. And so that is a huge thing. I mean, because I think a lot of people aren't even aware of that. They hear syndication or they hear group, crowdfunding or group sponsorship. There's a lot of different terms that people use, but they just kind of associate it with a large building when it's not really that's not accurate at all, honestly.
No. And so we set ours up where we have the forced appreciation plays, but our note portfolio as well. And for me, it's like I think our note portfolio, I was looking at it today, our monthly payments on that portfolio is $26,000 a month, and what comes in off of that. And we with the notes and with the yield we bought them at, and we pay our investors out. The investors get paid about $9,000 a month in interest, what they get paid out on it. So, it's pretty cool to see, you get a guy that does really well in land and he's got a little excess cash there, he can dump it with us. And now he puts 100 grand into it and he's got 11% coming back every year and he's getting paid monthly on it. So he's getting, just under $1,000 a month. And, that helps out, it's less work for you, less stress. And you're getting to see this come in and then you get your money back when you want to do it, when you want to pull it back out at the different tranche
Absolutely.
periods.
Yeah. So many different options, so many different things that are available. And as we tell people, take advantage of it. And obviously, it goes back to what we talked about earlier about, you're actually like, so many people, talk the talk, but they don't walk it, right? So when you're actually walking it and doing it, it's a huge difference. And I really like the point that you mentioned too about why you even started, because I think we were talking about that before we began. Both of us kind of got into education and into just working with others out of demand. It was like people were approaching us and being like, hey, do this. And it's like, okay. It's like, I never really thought about it, but okay, why not? And then it's like, and then the snowball starts rolling, right? And then, next thing you know, it's getting bigger and bigger. And that, so that's obviously great, because obviously instead of so many people out there that are just pushing information, it's actually people coming to you based on the fact that they see you actually doing this. And it's funny, talk about this really quick, because we talked about this early on and it kind of goes along with this. So we had somebody else on that was on here a couple weeks ago with me, and he's running a land business since 2017. He's now running a high 7-figure business. He said he was projections for 8 figures in 2025, and he broke it all down as to how that's doing it. And he's basically doing the exact same things he did in 2017. He hasn't really changed, because it's staying true, like you said. He's just brought in more people, more processes, better KPIs involved, all that. But one of the things that he mentioned was that the education space, the term he used was getting muddied, right? Recently, because of what's been going on, especially since 2020. So being in the education space yourself, and now that push that's out there is just nonstop content creation. It's not even about true education anymore. It's just about like content creation, What do you say about that? You've been around for a long time. You actually do educate. He doesn't, but he's opened it. We're in that world. We talk. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously you're not throwing anybody under the bus, but just what do you say about it? What are your thoughts on it?
So one of the things that drove me to follow your page and follow this is how you call out a lot of the educators in that space, in our space. And it cracks me up when I see that, because it's like, you had somebody post on your page talking about they did 6,000 deals. And what I have found is that I've gotten really old compared to a lot of the younger land investors. They're now, I have gotten to this point where I'm almost like the uncle that just kind of sits out there and just kind of laughs and watch, because I've watched a lot of the content creators journeys and watched them do anything. So, I said this term earlier, and I don't know if we were recording at that point or not. We talked about the echo chamber that's out there. And, most guys and girls, when they're creating something, they take what somebody else did and they put their own little twist on it. I'm no different. I looked at what somebody did and I was told I can't work east of the Mississippi. I can't use realtors. I can't get funding from banks. I can't do this. And I broke it all down and said, no, I can do that. Like, so we figured out how to work that around it. So what I think when you say the muddiest, I think there's a lot of blending going on, and like you said, a lot of content creation going on. I am too old and more focused on my family to sit here and shoot TikToks about land investing every day. I will post our podcast because we do record that weekly. But I don't have the energy to keep up with the younger land investor. But I will say that when you see behind, and it doesn't matter old or new, when you see behind the curtain, whether it's one of the original land investors, the internet land investors, or the Facebook group land investors, the podcast land investors, you see behind the curtain multiple times, you realize that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. And so for me, early on when we got started, is I always put my money where my mouth is, and we have ran a couple offerings where we had really expensive master classes, and I would think that those guys would back up the fact that they got their money's worth. But every dollar I made out of that, I put into somebody's deal that was in the group. I didn't keep it and go buy Ferrari or Lamborghini or, did not work. I put my money back to work with them and watched them succeed and learn this thing, whether they invested in me and trusted me. And so I wanted to invest back in them. And so when I look at the space across the board, I have to ask myself, and this is the one question I ask myself, would that person put their money back into their person they taught? And I don't see that very often. And so, and I'm not saying everybody has to be a funder, but if I'm like that guy told me the first time, put your money where your mouth is. And if I'm not willing to do that, that's my personal creed for me. And if I don't see that reciprocated across the board of the guru space, then that's not the guy for me, or the guy to learn from, or the girl to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's one of the things, I mean, you said I call it out, and I'm not calling it out to be a jerk. I'm
Yeah.
not calling it out to be, I don't name names. I don't even pay attention, honestly, because there's
Yeah.
so many out there now. I don't even know who's who anymore. I just hear what people say when they come to me,
Yeah.
right? Somebody says this and this and this, and well, I'm watching this and I'm watching this, and I have no problem calling it out. Like I say all the time, you got two different things. You've got people that are out there just talking, like you said, that are just pushing out content, and they're not really doing deals. Or if they are, they've only done them for like a year or two, and they like don't have any real experience.
Yep.
Or you've got the ones that maybe were legit and have done things, but they've gotten so involved in educating. That's all they do. And it's like they haven't had any relevance in a decade, right, of doing this. And things have changed. And so it's not that I'm sitting there saying, I'm sure there's a ton of good ones and I'm sure there's a ton of bad ones, right? Way more bad ones than good ones. And the reason I know you, honestly, is we've never worked together. We just followed each other, and we had similar things because we were both doing deals. We're out there actually, being involved. We're involved with our students. We're doing these things, the things that you mentioned, as opposed to just pushing out, and saying like the post I made yesterday that you said you laughed at. It's just everybody's out there with like, make 7 figures this year. It ain't gonna happen. Don't get me wrong. Somebody could, but if you're starting today, there's a 99.9% chance you are not going to make $1 million in 2025, right?
And I'll be transparent with you. My biggest revenue year was $17 million we ran. That was 3 years ago. What is this year? So it's 2022. In 23, we did 6.5 million, but made the same profit, which was 1.1. That's what I brought home after I paid everybody else and did partnerships and everything. Last year, our revenue dropped again. It's one of the toughest years we've seen in real estate. 47% of real estate agents did not do a transaction. We still were able to do about 44, and we cleared 750,000 to me after I paid everybody out. We did 2.5 in revenue. So those are real numbers. You can look them up. You can check across all the different LLCs. But when somebody tells me they're making 7 figures, and then I'm the type of guy that I look behind them in their camera when they're at their house or their apartment that they're renting. It's not super high end luxury, a condo. It's not this or that. I'm saying, okay, well, did that person really make $1 million the last 4 years? And he's living in a $750 a month rent apartment? Probably not. So I think we got to start looking at the details and kind of go through that. I'm not calling anybody out in particular, but if that's the thing, let's have a real conversation about it. Because
I think that's hilarious, because I do the same thing, and I always thought like, oh, it must be just me doing that, because it's like I look at it and be like, you're clearly like in an apartment building. And I'm not saying that everybody's crazy about going out and they need to have $1 million home. But you're also not living in a 2-bedroom apartment if you're making 7 figures a year, right? You own a house at that point. Or if you're renting, I got a buddy that's doing that. He doesn't want to own, but he's in a high rise, very high rent. I mean, because that's where you're gonna live. Cars the same way. I'm not saying everybody's into cars, but if you're making $1 million a year, you're not driving a Toyota Corolla, probably, right? It's like, you may not be, or if you are, it's not a late model. Maybe you really don't care and you want something. I hate cars. I don't do this. Maybe you do go buy it, but it's new, right?
You see signs across the board. Yeah, you can see signs across the board, whether that looks like. So
yeah. And the thing to me is, you do care about something. Maybe you don't care about the house. Okay, well, are you traveling then? Maybe you don't care about the cars. Well, do you have that? There's nobody out there, I can say this for a fact, that's making $1 million a year that says, I don't care about a nice car, I don't care about a nice house, and I don't feel like I want to go anywhere. It's like, I'm just going to sit around and do. No, that does not the way it works, right?
Okay.
There's something that matters to you.
Yeah.
And so I agree 100%. That is, because I think it's hilarious, because I'll see like these videos. I don't really follow anybody, but I'll see them pop up and I'll see where they are. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's like that doesn't even fit the story, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's definitely true. You mentioned your podcast, and you mentioned like you don't spend all, but you have had over 500 episodes.
Yeah.
So that being said, I mean, talking about people that are listening, feedback you're getting. I mean, what are some of the recurring themes, tips, whatever it is that people say that resonates the most with them?
I think that there people get discouraged when they hear that they're going to make seven figures or this. It's so easy, and this is blue ocean when it's not there anymore. It's you're going to send out 500 letters and get a deal. So they'll save up their money and send 500 letters out. This is a business. You're going to have to invest into it, and it's tough because you get told so much from so many directions if you're starting to get into this, because you start getting you're trying to do all the research and find out what's what. And so for me, it's it becomes let's just think about what we're trying to do here and what the end goal is. Now, would I ever tell somebody that's been doing this 2 or 3 months to quit their job? Like, I was doing this maybe 4 months and I got fired. 5 months I got fired, and I had to make a move. It was either go back to work at the other railroad or do this. And so I don't wish that on anybody. That was the worst stress that I've ever felt in my life.
And that
Uh,
included having a year of income.
yeah,
You
and that
talked about that
included
earlier.
having your
You had a
yeah,
year of income built
yeah,
in.
and at that point, so, and I'm not going to tell you as a rags to riches story. At that point, my net worth was probably 750 grand. I had equity in a house. I had a good 401k. I had savings, and I had a year of income in that. And so, I wasn't destitute. It wasn't like I had my last $5,000 to buy training in a course and I couldn't make a mistake. I had runway, but I treated it like I didn't. And so many people think that with their $5,000 they're going to be able to just make millions really quick. And this is a compounding game, no matter what you invest. So the recurring theme that I try to put the message out for me is buy an asset that's for less than it's worth and sell it for more. Take the profit and redo it, and just keep doing it. But the second part to that is people either have really good years and then they didn't put money back or didn't save or reinvest in the business or compound it. And they just go out and buy the new truck, go buy the vacation, go buy the big house, and then they're sitting there back at square one. And now their monthly nut is so high they can't keep up with it because they thought it was always going to be like that. And so you have to invest in what that long term money and short term money looks like, and keep betting on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the things we talk about is I think people tend to look at real estate way too broad because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, it always appreciates. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you're looking at like 1950 to 2000, 75-year window when you see this, which is true. But you're missing when you hone in on like a 10-year window, you miss all the,
Yep.
and when you're hitting one of these, you got to be able to get through that if that's where all your money is, right? If that's where
Yep.
you are, if that's what you're counting on for income, and it's like you can't just assume that what we saw in 2020, 2021 and COVID, those were nutso years. I mean, everybody,
Yep.
you could literally just send mail, shotgun, do whatever you wanted, and you were going to make some money.
Yep.
It's like you had to be a complete moron to not make money in those years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that way anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and you have to change and you have to adjust and all of that. So yeah, 100%. As I said, we resonate a lot on the same points as to what's
Mm-hmm.
important because, and one of the things I always tell people, and you just said it, is put the money back into the business. I always tell people take some out, celebrate your wins because it makes you feel better. But I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying you make a $10,000 sale that you take out, go on vacation and spend six of it.
No.
I'm saying go to a nice dinner and spend 100 of it, right? It's like
Yeah.
make yourself feel good. Take your wife out and say, hey, we're going out. We're going to go get drinks. We're going to go get a nice dinner, a few $100, whatever. But
Yeah.
the rest of it is now getting back, and you keep that rolling.
Yeah, I tell people to turn it 3 times. If you can turn your money 3 times and you started with 10 and you sell that and it turns into 25, you sell that 25, you buy 2 lots, and now that turns into 50 or 60, and now that 50 or 60 you're going to turn to 150. If you've turned it 3 times, now your war chest looks a little bit different. So if you can be that disciplined, and it's tough for a lot of people. Luckily for me, is I had that runway and I just keep everything today. And everything today still, my house is paid by syndications from apartments that I made on subdivides. I took 60% of the money, dumped them in apartment syndications. It pays my house payment. One of the business, the notes pays for a car that we have is a Section 179 car, so it's a tax play. So everything, every dollar I have going out also has a purpose coming back in what it covers. And so outside of that, my land business just turns on top of itself. I don't touch that. If I partner on deals, I'll use that as the money we live off of. And with the coaching and stuff like that, I don't do a lot of, we don't push our course much anymore, but we have affiliate stuff that comes in and pays. And all that stuff that's passive, I try to live off that and then keep the land money turning on itself until it's a point where there's enough there that I can slide some over. Now I've got 6 more months to live or 2 more years to live. Or my wife wants to go do a really nice vacation. We'll pull a little bit out of that. But usually that's a travel expense because I'm going to look at something while I'm there. I'm going to South Africa in 26 because I'm going to help a safari guy. He can buy 10,000 acres for 75 grand next to him, and I'm going to fund him because I'm cheaper than the bank there. And so we're going to see how that all structure works. Well, now I'm going to go on a safari and it's a complete business write-off because we're going to buy property and fund property for a guy. So, if you start looking at the business as a whole and your lifestyle as a whole and really make it turn for yourself and control it and control that narrative.
And if you don't have the ability to do that, I'll say, because I know, like you said, not everybody has the runway like you did.
Yeah.
But you can still do it you said 3 times. Okay. Well, then do half 6 times.
Yeah.
Right. If you can't afford it because you're going to take money out to live as you're fine. That's the reason you're doing this, right? It's to replace things and get into the next level and quit your job or whatever it may be. And maybe you're like, hey, I just made $15,000, but I need 7 of that. Okay, well, pull out, but then take the other 8 and turn that over in extra time. There's a lot of different ways still to structure that. It's not an all or nothing thing. And I think a lot of people look at it that way. It's either like, oh, I'm just going to no, if you don't have all the money to put in, then you don't. If if you do have all that money, then put it in. Great. And it's a case by case scenario too, right? It's like you got it turning and it's going great. But then the next deal, you're like, oh, this is getting low and I'm making 15,000 and I need, okay, well then use it. Nothing wrong with that, but keep the other money turning.
Yep,
and again,
exactly
so
right.
many people totally miss that. So where do you think things are heading? I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You saw everything kind of go crazy. And like we said, all these people jumping in and teaching it. And now even that's starting to die out a little bit. I wouldn't call it dead, but it's obviously people are falling off. There's not nearly educators are sort of disappearing out there. Investors are disappearing. People are going into other things. So where do you think this is heading in the next decade?
I think we're going to see, I mean, there's always been a land trade. So it's now, what does that look like for you? Do you go into the idea? For me, I look at what's been around the longest, and you look at the bank. And so now I think it becomes, what's your capital stack look like, and how do you play into that? And what can you do with that capital stack to make it work? So we really doubled down on mortgages and owner finance because we saw our business shifted. We were about 75, 80% cash at closing, whether they got financing elsewhere or came to cash at closing, and 20% owner financing. And we always offered it on everything. Now we're running about 90% owner financing. And so for me, it's like, what does that look like on the back end to keep the business growing and running? Now, it's nice to say, hey, between like the fund and my personal stuff, we're about $2 million, just over $2 million in notes coming in. That's really nice to say. But if all my money's out in notes and I'm only getting, whatever my portion of that is with the businesses and the way the structures are, if I say I'm only getting 15 grand a month, but I spent everything on deals and I only have 15 grand a month. Now my business is slowing down. So what are my exits and my pivots inside of that? Can I get cheap capital from an unsecured loan? Can I take a line of credit and use that money? Can I sell notes, and what does that look like? And what does that structure to re-influx cash into it? So I think from a business perspective, for me, I'm seeing the model right now is we're seeing owner finance and really focusing on how we can make that work for ourselves and using what they already do in other industries, whether the bank or in note investing. What does that look like, and how do we turn that into land and make it really work for us? So, and it's capital intensive.
The owner financing part, I was seeing it a lot. It was almost non-existent for a couple of years. It was I mean, I've been doing this since 2011, and early on, that's like all it was. It was like everybody wanted it, and that's when we could buy for 10 cents on the dollar because you were selling them for way lower too, though, and people didn't. Then obviously 2018ish, 19, it started to go up. 2020, 21, it was, and that was like all cash, like everything. It was like put it out there and it was gone the same day half the time, right? It was like, and now again we're seeing it swing back the other way, and that's across the board. That's not, you're talking about like larger properties and stuff that you've subdivided and things like that, ranch land, recreational land, and it's true everywhere. Even the people that are buying these smaller lots and infill lots and things like that, they're all asking for it again. Not the level 90. It's not 9-1 or 9 out of 10 like in your case in those, but it's still probably half of people even in those are asking for owner financing now.
Yeah. And so the question becomes is how do you keep your business growing with that? And what does that look like for you? And can you monetize that asset? Because for so long, we heard that, 99 down, $99 a month land contracts and blah, blah. Well, when you set up real mortgages and you have real deeds of trust and you have the promissory notes and it's recorded, and it's all done legally, and you're working through that, your buyer's a little bit different. It's a little bit better, but that asset you hold, that piece of paper, actually has a pretty good value. So whether you're selling it at a 14 yield or an 18 to 20% yield, somewhere in that range, you can get most of the cash back that you would have taken on a cash sale anyways. And so you still get the benefit of the cash sale. Now, doesn't mean you have to sell it today or tomorrow, because that balance, since you have an amortization schedule and you can play, its interest is front loaded because of the amortization schedule, you can really play with those numbers to see what you're going to do. So I could hold it for 3 months. Those first 3 months are basically all interest and still get 75, 80% of the cash note. Plus I had the down payment, plus I had 3%, 3 payments. And so realistically, I'm getting 94 cents on the dollar back for what I really would have sold it for anyways. And so you have ways to manipulate that, and you have to think about it in that terms, I think. And we
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it's so funny, because I've heard people say like, well, I don't want to. I'm going to sell it right away. I'm going to sell it. I'm like, do you need the cash? And they're like, no. And I'm like, why? Because the value of that note in a year is like right where it's at right now. It's like,
Yeah.
if it's a 10-year one or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it's like a 3-year, that's not true. But
No,
like,
so
if it's a 10-year note and it's worth, it's like they've barely touched it. It's like, at that point, it's like, unless they paid extra or something like that. But in that case, you have extra cash anyway. So what do you care? Because it went to you.
yep.
So yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of people kind of skip that. And there is, there are like people out there now that talk about like the whole like triple, I think they call them triple closings. I've heard that, sell it to this and then do it and sell it to a note buyer and all that, and
Yeah.
do it all simultaneously. And it's like, well, unless you need the money right then and there, why?
Yep.
It's like, why go through that? And if that's the case, then why not just sell it to the cash buyer to begin with? It's like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of different moving parts that, but to your point, I think that's huge. And I don't think it is talked about enough, as to, selling it. You can sell the note after, but you can sit on it for a little while. You can obviously, they're barely touching it, and then on to the next thing. So
And
that's,
there's been some conversations of selling partials, and it's something I've started studying. I'm not fully done on it, but imagine you have a 10-year note, you sell the first 5 years of it, and then when you get it back, you're basically backloading it. And so, this is a note school thing. Eddie Speed talks about it on his stuff with his stuff, but it's that's a viable option to get cash up front, but you still have that back end money later on when you're coming for it. So there are a million ways to do this business, and I think it becomes now, once you figure out, hey, I got a property for less than it's worth, I sell it for more. How do I want to sell it, cash or owner finance? What do I do on either one of those things? So you talked about when you call the county, you have those next steps or those trigger points. You do the same thing in your business on the exit and try to work through those and see what you can get to.
yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to give one piece of advice to a land investor that's looking to break into higher ticket projects, some of the stuff you're talking about, what's that piece of advice?
I would say dial in what your requirements are, like, and don't waver from it, because if you have to explain a property to somebody and you tell me all the negatives and then you try to throw in a but I think it won't. You have to get hard and fasted on what your buy box is, and stick into that, whether it's a does it have access, is it wetland, is it flood zone, and these are simple core. It's like going to baseball practice the first part of the season. We're about to get into baseball season, and your coach goes out there and makes you put two hands on the ground when you're doing ground balls. You're throwing the ball right. You're playing perfect ball. You have to do it perfect every time. You do the little things right. So when you move into the bigger properties, it's just natural, and you don't get emotional about it because you're trying to make a gamble. We want to know 100% sure with as close to 100% clarity that we know it's going to be a deal, or you don't touch it, or you do it close and you don't risk your money. But if I'm talking about, if I'm putting my dollar in it, I need to know it's without a doubt I'm not losing any money.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, we've actually been very successful with that. I mean, all the deals we've done, we've never lost money on a property. People say
Okay.
all the time, like, "Oh, how's that possible?" And I'm like, because if you do things right, and
Mhm.
we're not gambling, we're investors,
Yep.
right? And even at what we buy them for, if the market starts to shift, which they tend to do, right? Then we're still in a place where we can make money on that. And if the market shifts the other way, then we're in even a better position, right? Because now
Yep.
we're actually adding equity just because of that. It's like people talk about like stock markets and like, oh, it's a gamble. And it's like, well, it's a gamble if you're buying and selling and you don't know what you're doing. But if you're actually investing and you're sitting on it,
Mhm.
and you're playing the game long term, which is what stocks actually are designed to do and all that, it's not really a gamble. And if you're diversified, you're not, you may lose money on a stock, but you're not going to lose money, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna, it's the same process. So it's like, and real estate's even safer, honestly. I mean, if you do it right. I mean, you got to think about, from our perspective of, if a stock's worth $100, that you have to go buy it for $100.
Yeah.
Whereas we're going and buying that $100 stock for $50 or $60 today, right?
Mhm.
When it's worth 100. So it's even better
Yep.
in our situation. I think people need to realize that. So we'll wrap up here, guys. So if you guys want to jump on and ask any questions, we'll unmute you here in a minute. If you have anything you want to do in a chat, go ahead with that too. We'll ask 4 more questions really quick. This is just the ones that I always end with. So
Okay.
first off, call it the shameless plug section. Any upcoming projects, courses, initiatives, anything like that you're excited about and want to share with the audience?
Oh man, so we're doing our live event in Cancun next week. We've got 28 individuals going to that, so that's pretty cool. I haven't seen an international one go that big, but typically we do a yearly live event. But this year we went international, so that's pretty cool. But outside of that, man, it's just going to be the podcast weekly right now. No big courses, no big pushes or anything like that. Just kind of think after 24 and seeing the smoke and mirrors that's out there. Really want to focus on just honing in me personally what I want to do for with my life, but also these deals, kind of pushing them through. I've got some projects that I'm not ready to talk about, but they're working, and I've been working on them for kind of behind the scenes for the last 3 or 4 months. With it kind of falls in the value add, but going vertical, but at scale where not many people have broached. So I'm waiting on the final. I'll say this: we're waiting on the final engineered plans to come back, so I have them ready to go. But we have barn door packages ready to go that can be shipped for like 13.5 to drop on your property. You need a slab and you'd put windows and doors in it, but now you have a 900 square foot barn dough ready to go that we're going to start seeing those pop up across the community. I plan on doing what we call a bunkie build party that it's going to be free if anybody wants to come out, but I'm buying 2 bunkie kits from the guys in Canada, and we're going to bring those down to a subdivision we're going to do in LaFleur, Oklahoma. And we're going to spend a weekend out there, and we're going to build 2 of these cabins. And the reason I like that is because I think there's probably 85% of land investors that kind of do the land investing like we do, the internet style, that never stepped foot on their property, yet haven't ever got their hands dirty. So with this, it's going to give them the opportunity to go out, watch us clear it, build the cabins, and just kind of have that brethren, just one-off like individual stuff. So a lot of people want to charge for live events. This one will be free. Just come out, offer some help. We'll grill. I'll put bathroom trailers out there, make sure that everybody can go poop and pee and shower if they need to. But it's just going to be kind of a good old fashioned camping trip with a bunch of dudes. We're going to raise a bunkie or two. Um,
Cool.
but
Sounds like
otherwise from
fun,
that,
honestly. And I saw your one in Cancun. I think Jerry actually commented on the
yeah,
post, and I don't know if he's
yeah,
going or not. The way he
yeah,
said
he
it, it
is.
sounds like
Jerry
he might be
Dalgish
going.
is. Yeah, he's been to
Yeah.
he was actually one of he won a award at one of our live events. So we got him a little Viking silver piece because he's Mad Viking is kind of his coin and his land business. So we threw that at him. But that'll be fun. But outside of that, it's just business as normal. I'm always available. If somebody who has a question or wants to talk, like I said, I've kind of pulled back from the pushing of courses because I just wanted to focus on me and my family, and kind of gotten busy with the coaching of soccers and wrestling and cheer and all that stuff. But really wanted to dive deep in some of the vertical projects that I have going, because we have a luxury car condo we're running through entitlements right now. It's the most money I've ever spent for the smallest amount of land. We have under contract 8.5 acres. It's $1 million, and we're going to build 115 units on it. That'll be luxury car condos and storage. So we're working through that right now in the entitlement piece. So I'm hoping that gets kicked off here pretty quick. So that's kind of
Yeah,
the
nice.
I'm
And I know you've
focusing.
talked to me a little bit about the barn dough stuff, and it sounds pretty cool and exciting. And it's actually something that I've looked about just doing for myself, honestly,
Yeah,
just because I like that look and I like that design. So we've
yeah,
actually talked to, and it's not just, I mean, it does save money, but I mean, obviously, you just get a whole lot more options. And plus,
yep,
they're safer. I mean, there's a lot of pluses to them that I think people kind of, overlook a little bit. So, but I
yeah.
know we talked about that before. So obviously, people can keep watching you and they'll be able to see that. So,
Those it.
that being said, I mean, where can people listening to this, or where can they find out more about your work, access your podcast, get
Yeah,
involved with collaboration if they're interested in any of these things? Your event or anything like that you're talking about. What's the best way to find
yeah.
or
So
follow you?
podcast Casual Fridays REI. Social medias are the same. We're on all your Apple, Spotify, all that. You can go to our website and get the podcast there as well. If you really want to follow just me in general, J_J_Sliva SLIVA on Instagram. That falls into my Facebook as well. And I don't post like just straight land stuff. It's me living my life, and so you get to see kind of that mix of, occasionally you may see some tractor out there running or me trying to drive a bulldozer or something, but it's really basically just me living life, and I'm pretty accessible through any of the social medias. If you have a question, reach out. I'm not the guy that's going to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you at Starbucks, but if you have a question, I'll answer it, through Messenger. Or if you're in the area, you want to swing by for lunch. I like lunch. I go to lunch at 12 every day. So if somebody wants to go, I'll definitely go with you. So my office is in Crowley, Texas. So pretty easy to get a hold of that way.
Awesome. And we'll put that information in the description for anybody that's watching this after the fact. So the two bonus questions I always ask people, and maybe the first one applies, maybe it doesn't because everybody's different, but people that follow me, watch me, they know that I listen or read many business books a year. Many do. So anything that you are currently reading or that you have on your must-read list?
Oh man, so I'll say must read because I think this book changed the perspective for me a couple of years back, and it was a recommendation of another land investor. It was Die with Zero, and it really talks about the idea of enjoying your money while you make it, and not just leave it for your kids. And so there's a balance of that with investments and stuff. But when you're an entrepreneur and you put everything on the line every day, you go out, you need to find some enjoyment in what that is, and whether it's planning for your kids. First house and helping them with their down payment, you get to see that versus them getting it when you die. Or is it do you go on the vacations? And so what you'll see is me and my wife, we try to go on 2 to 3 pretty good sized vacations with our kids a year, where they're getting that memory of, maybe it's we spend a lot of time in Mexico, so are they going down there and getting to play on the beach with dad? They're going to remember that forever. It's a core memory for them. My son he went to Canada bear hunting. I take him on some of the subdivides. We'll put up pop-up blind and take them hunting. These are core memories that we're trying to create. And while it may not fit the normal budget or maybe outside of that, they're getting to enjoy that piece with their dad. And so the idea is, don't hold your money for this rainy day or this injury or this sickness that may happen. It's, enjoy it to a front. I'm not saying not be financially responsible. What I'm saying is strategically, you can really increase your life and the enjoyment you have out of it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. It's definitely something that resonates. We talked about that before we started.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people, a big term that's used now is like generational wealth, or we're going to build
Yeah.
generational wealth and all that. But it's like you're missing out on everything in the meantime to do that. I mean, if that happens and your business grows and it's natural and you can leave something for your kids and all that, while still doing all of that, then great. But at the same time, don't the focus be, you're going to leave everything to them, but they don't get to enjoy your life now with them, right? It's like it kind of defeats the purpose. And I think, that's that balancing act that so many people, miss out on.
Yeah.
The other question I always ask people is non-business, a daily habit you think is essential for success.
For me, my daily habit is 2 things. First thing when I wake up, I try to recenter myself on what I'm for some gratitude. And I know that we hear the cliche, oh, I give my affirmations and gratitude. No, I mean, I really started doing this a couple years ago because I felt like I felt like I was being surrounded by people that weren't centered on what really mattered. And for me, having a nice a home with a roof over my head, having things, a healthy wife, healthy kids, some of the stuff that we take for granted until it pops up. And I've really had to focus on that piece. And so that's why you see some of the stuff that I do is so family centric. And then after that, I go to the gym. Every day I work out in the morning, and I spend anywhere from an hour to 2 hours there, depending on the day, how I'm feeling. But I always go in and make sure I get at least 6 exercises in. That's a non-negotiable for me. And it sounds cliche across the board, but that allows me to go and get moving, stress, kind of get the stress out. So I'm thankful for what I have, and then I'm going to continue to work to be better and still do the hard things every day. And there's been times in my life where I got away from going to the gym or quit running or things like that, and later on in life it really bothered me that I did that. And so I just try to keep pushing through those with those little things. So those
Yeah,
are non-business, non-negotiables for me.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's good to have non-negotiable stuff that's non-business. Some people are so focused all the time, and I'm the same way. I mean, it's only been recent for me, but working out, I mean, I was just big, and I was just like, well, I got to get in better shape.
Yeah.
And not only has that helped me get in better shape and feeling better, the amount of mental clarity and just being able to function better in other things because of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like people sit there, they look at the byproduct of like, oh, I'm losing time. It's like, no, you're actually probably gaining time because you're going to
Yeah.
sleep better, you're going to feel better, you're going to eat better. It's like all of these byproducts that come. So I definitely agree. That's a huge one. And obviously the gratitude thing's huge too, because I think so many people just take it, they take for granted where we live sometimes. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, the land of opportunity. But that could change. I mean, anything,
Yep.
a war, anything could change. So being content and focused and realizing what you're thankful for is huge. So
Yeah.
that's all I got, guys. So if any of you have any questions, it's you can unmute yourself, you can turn your video on, you can put it here in the chat. We'll leave it open for a second here. If nobody hops on, then we'll call it a day. But I do see it's not a question, but he just said he's a former railroader as well. And he said what's he say here? He says they pay you good, but 24/7, 365, they own you. Paid prison.
Yep, Frank, you're exactly right. When I took the job, I was 21. Um, sorry, we're running late for wrestling, so um, but the guy told me I was Edward Jones, and I was like, hey, Edward Jones is going to pay me $55,000 a year, then I get commission, And the guy tells me, he goes, dude, you'll make 100 grand a year if you just answer your phone. And at 21, I was working two jobs at the time. I worked at the bank during the day and then worked at Chili's at night, so I could afford to buy my wife's engagement ring. So I was like, wait a second, you mean all I got to do is go to work and you're going to pay me 100 grand a year? And he's like, you just show up and go to work like I think you will. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds easy enough. And so that's what I did. Through my 20s, all my friends were going out, and I just did that and just kept putting money back. And so, Frank, you know the rules that you have to follow, the hours you have to keep. And at that time, we didn't have undisturbed rest. We were 5 hours, and then I get a 3 hour call, so I was back to work 8 hours later. And I'd work months at a time where I was just turning that fast. And so that was a time of my life I don't miss, but I know I can do it. And so I'm glad I don't have to anymore.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say here to everybody is, feel free, follow him, because I think you'll see that what he's talking about matches exactly who he is. Because I will say, like, a lot of your posts, I mean, I've followed you for a long time. Your wife, your kids, I know you're a car guy. Your cars
Mhm.
are in there having fun, but you show stuff that you're working on. That balance there throughout it. There's a lot of pictures of you guys on vacations and going different places and things like
Yeah.
that, which is fine. I mean, I'm the exact same way. I don't have kids,
Yeah.
but I'm always posting stuff with. So I think that it's nice to see like that authenticity and that just not hiding anything, like you said, the smoke and mirror stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool there. So they're asking for your links right there. So it's let's see, you want to type it in? You want me to type it in, or?
I'll type in like the ats.
And again, like I said, here we're this, for those that are live, we're putting it in the comments. If you're watching this after, this information will be in the description as well for you, so that you can follow Justin. You can get onto his podcast if you're interested in any of the things that he talked about. His business meeting that he's having. Like, there's one next week, obviously not that one, but a future one. Or getting involved with any of these projects and things like that, then obviously
Yeah.
follow them, reach out, and go
Well,
from
and I'll
there.
be speaking at two different live events that are pretty fun live events. There's Milk and Honey. They do a land and supercars in Colorado. That'll be end of June. Peter Nagasaki, I guess that's how you pronounce his last name, and then Drew Haney, they kind of host that one. And then I'll be doing with Dave Dennison up in Minnesota, and that's in August, and that's called the Unconference. Both of those are great events. Unconference, if you use my name, I think you save $200, but they're both good conferences, both in different parts of the country, and different parts of the year. So
Unconference is Seth, right?
Seth goes on the Unconference with us. He's one of the moderators with me. We've been a moderator the last 3 years, and so Dave Dennison puts that on.
Okay.
So
yeah. And names I know. I mean, again, I don't monitor people, so I don't really know. But I mean, Seth's a name, and Dave, that have been around for a while too, as well. And people that maybe we'll try to get them on an episode in the future here. People that are actually living this and doing it, and things like that. And the milk and honey thing I've seen doesn't interest me, because that's not my world, the car thing. But I'm not surprised that you go to that, because obviously that definitely fits in. I think I've actually seen pictures of you and some of the stuff you drove. And
yeah, I got to drive a McLaren 720 or 650 LT, and then a Porsche GT3 RS. So both fun cars. But the way they do it is they take you out of the back of their shop and they run you up a mountain road up into this national park, and it's a lot of fun. You can drive up and back, but it's a blast. And I'm a car guy, I like that. And so just some of the sounds those cars make is just it's intoxicating to me.
yeah, absolutely. So I think that's it for questions. So,
Cool.
Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Dropped a ton of content For those who are watching live, this will be released this week on our podcast, so you can listen to it. You'll be able to watch the video. It'll be on YouTube if you want to go back and catch anything if you missed it. It'll be out there, and you can obviously watch it that way. That'll go out in the end of this week. So, and obviously, if you're watching it on one of those things already, you can rewatch it and things like that. So, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of content shared, a lot of information, and obviously from somebody that's actually doing the deals, walking the talk as well, and pretty evident and clear. So I thank you on behalf of everybody for joining us. So guys, thank you so much for joining us this week on